All right, welcome to our New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for today, December 15th. We have a great guest tonight, Steve Cahn, who's going to be talking about a brand new book he wrote. Let me just go over some other issues with you, not issues, things prior to introducing Steve. Everybody should have got the newsletter I sent out. It has all the dates on all of the January through March Zooms we'll be having. It's a pretty full boat, but I try to maneuver people around if need be, and we will go from there. Dan Taylor will be addressing us also in the future. He's got a brand new book out, which I'm sure will be as great as his other ones. So there is no meeting next week, so in advance, I wish everybody a happy Hanukkah. Merry Christmas, and I hope you all have a healthy, holiday season. We will reconvene in 2 weeks on December 29th. It'll be a giant, gripe session, rap session, whatever, and we could talk about the team on the field, off the field, and also ways to improve our organization, moving forward. So I'd like you all to give a warm welcome to Steve Cahn. He'll be addressing us tonight. Steve has a brand new book out, Sid Gordon, An American Baseball Story. This book is available right now on Kindle, and I believe the first week in January, the book will be available as a soft cover book. Makes a great Hanukkah or Christmas gift, and you'll find out why when Steve starts talking. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Steve Cahn. Steve, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Gary. Let me say at the beginning, one of the finest things that has come out of writing this book is that I've unexpectedly met a lot of people like folks here tonight, and I've talked to folks who have emailed me and called from different parts of the country, and it's fascinating that there are that many folks out there all these years later that still remember who Sid Gordon was and have thoughts and memories of when he played. And I got an email from a guy who said, I'm looking forward to buying the book. My dad used to cut his grass and, had all these stories. So it's been a really interesting experience. So let me say, and I say this in the beginning of the book, Gary has a book. I sent Gary a copy. I got some copies when they first came out. It is on Amazon. You can pre-order it. When it's going to get delivered with Amazon is anybody's guess. It's in pre-order mode. Some of it depends on how many orders there are. I don't know, but I say this in the beginning of the book. I'm not, I'm not a sports writer. I'm not a historian. I'm a trial lawyer. I try cases. My area of specialty is really in employment law. But Sid Gordon was my cousin. That's my connection with Sid Gordon, is that I knew him as a kid. My family knew him. My mom lived in the same apartment building as him as a kid. And this was a project that I was always interested in, knowing more about him. I remember at one point trying to find a book. I had seen Sid Gordon discussed or mentioned in lots of books and articles, but nobody had written a book about him. And I wanted to learn more. And I should have done it earlier. You just never do all the things that we all plan on doing. I'm 61. At some point in time, I think it was a COVID mission. At some point in time, I decided if I'm ever going to do this, I better really do it now. I wish I had started earlier, because as I got into the research, I found that there were a lot of folks who could have provided a lot of information who were no longer with us. And if I'd started the project 10 years earlier, I might have had the opportunity to talk to some of those folks. So that's how I came to do this, is I really wanted to learn a little bit more. One of the first things that I did, of course, was to reach out to Sid's two sons, who were both alive at the time. Richard is with us. Unfortunately, his older brother, Mike, who really was a teenager. He was 13, 14 years old at the tail end of Sid's career, and had fascinating stories, many of which I try and capture in the book, of really growing up in the locker rooms of the Giants, the Braves, of spending time around Jackie Robinson as a kid, spending time around Willie Mays as a kid, and some of those experiences. Richard was a couple years younger than Mike, so Richard's here with us to fill in some of the details or answer questions about his dad. So that's how I got into the idea of writing a book. I didn't know that I would find all the information that I found when I started it. The book is 371 pages with 402 footnotes. So it's pretty, it's long, and there's a lot of detail into it. So I should probably say, as I look around as to see who's in the meeting with us, probably almost everybody here knows more about the Giants and knows more about baseball than me. I think I know a lot. I'm a baseball fan like everybody else. I've played when I was younger. I've coached, but I recognize that the vast majority of folks here know a lot about the game, have experienced a lot more about the game than I have. And I tried to write the book for the fan who has read a lot about baseball, understands a lot about baseball, and was looking for something different, something a little bit more insightful, something that discussed some of the stories that they all knew from a different perspective. And that's kind of what my mission was. So far, the folks that have read it and seem to have enjoyed it and had questions and were excited about some of the things that they saw, which to me was fascinating, because when I wrote it, I didn't know whether anybody but me would ever really enjoy what's in there. So I want to tell you a little bit about the book and tell you a little bit about Sid Gordon, and I have some photos and a couple of the documents I want to show you that we can talk about. There's two in particular that I think I know what the photo is. I think I know where the photo came from, but I'm not certain exactly. It's a photo I'm going to show you a little bit later on that came from a family photo album. We have all these family photo albums. We have recorded interviews with Sid's wife. But a lot of this stuff's undated. A lot of this stuff, even the newspaper articles, they're just cut out and you don't know what paper they came from or what date they are. And so there was a good deal of detective work to try to figure out, well, who was on the Giants that year? And if this guy was there, this must be this year. And they're talking about playing the Reds. Gee, when did they play the Reds and beat the Reds 4-1? And you could go back and figure out when it was. And then from that direction, kind of figure out where the article came from. So that was really the process. So I can take over the screen, I guess, whenever you want. Hopefully it's going to work. Yep. It usually works when I do it. I've never done screen sharing with you, Gary. So if it doesn't work, I'm going to blame you for screwing it up, not me.
I'm sure it's going to work. I just want to say two quick things. People sometimes complain about Facebook. The reason I got Steve, there was a feed saying that there was this new book coming out on Sid Gordon. And I was like, holy cow. And that's how I got in touch with Steve. And the other thing is, Steve did send me an advance copy. It's long, but it's a quick read. It's really quite enjoyable. So,
well, and that you make a good point, because I've followed this group and others, and I followed a group led by Alan Friedman, who runs a group, a Jewish Sports Heritage Association. It's a fascinating group. I don't know how he does all the research and comes up with obscure Jewish athletes. You know, this kid won the Idaho State Wrestling Championship. I don't know how he comes up with all of it, but he does. And somehow he and I connected, and I've spoke to him on the phone. He's a fascinating guy, knows an awful lot, and of course was a Gordon fan when he was a kid. He introduced me to a lot of different people along the trail, and that's how I've got to meet people from all over the place. And really, this is just the beginning process, and where it's going to all go, I don't know, but I'm looking forward to it. The other thing is I've met, and Rich Gordon knows this, I've met cousins I didn't even know I had. I've heard from, second, third cousins twice removed. Hey, you wrote a story about this common relative of ours. And so it's really been an interesting story. And that's really, I guess I can take over to.
You did. The screen is yours.
Let's make sure we can do that before we start yapping away. So hold on a second. Okay. I think I did it right.
Yeah, look at that. Nice job.
Look at that. So, well, we did do this in court all the time, but I usually have another lawyer with me who's a lot smarter than me doing all the technology stuff. So anyhow, this is a picture of the book. Gary showed you the book already. I got to minimize some people so I can use the arrow. Just to tell you what, that's a photo that I have the original photo, and the original photo's torn, and the top of Sid's hat's torn off. That's Sid, obviously, he's touching home. I later found out that photograph was taken by a photographer from the New York Times, who then gave the picture to Sid and his family, and it was in their scrapbook. But I chose this because this is a day that it's May 22nd, 1948, and Sid hit a grand slam that day. And he later on in an interview, a year or so later in an interview with Russ Hodges, said that this day, which happens to be his wife's birthday, was the turning point in his career. He had been all of a sudden learned how to be a power hitter, learned how to pull the ball. And this day, I don't know if I doubt he had the picture with him, but he described this day in some detail as a day that stuck out in his mind. And so when I found that picture, I had no idea when it was dated, but later in my research found that it was in the New York Times that day. So I knew that happened to symbolize what he felt was a key turning point in his career. And while he'd been around and knocking around for a while, really 48 was his first really, really serious season. So let me get into some of the photos we have and start kind of in the beginning. Can anybody see? I have a,
yeah.
I had something in front of it. So this is Sid. I'm not sure how old he is, but he's with the Jersey City Giants. So it's probably 1940. It could be 39, but it's probably 1940. He's playing with the Giants over in Jersey City. So just again, I told you a little before about the family connection. So Jewish family, came from Europe. Sid's father was born in Europe, came from Europe. Sid's mother, Rose. Sid's mother, Rose, is one of 5 sisters, all Jewish women from somewhere in Eastern Europe. No one's exactly sure where the heck they're from. And 4 of them all lived in one apartment building in Brooklyn. My grandmother was one of them, and they all lived there with their families, with their kids, in a crowded and what he described as a pretty tough neighborhood. We're talking about the 1920s, the 1930s. He graduated high school in 1936, which was DiMaggio's rookie year. So his father was in the coal business. When I say he was in the coal business, he delivered coal. He originally had a horse and wagon, and then, of course, had a truck, and then more than one truck. And the coal was literally stored in the basement of this apartment building. And Sid worked in that coal business from the time he was an adolescent till even then, as a kid playing for Jersey City. He worked there when he could. He worked in that coal business, delivering coal, probably through he was in the service during the war, but he worked there, I think, as late as 46 or 47 when he was already playing for the Giants. That we talk about baseball today and baseball before. Somebody was mentioning about how the guys all had to work. Some of these guys worked during, not just in the off season, some of these guys had to work during the season. And Sid, when he was young, was one of those players. So that's him when he's in the minors. And I spend some time in the book talking about his family background, growing up in Brooklyn, my familiarity with Brooklyn. I've been there, obviously, like everybody else. We all know Brooklyn and its uniqueness if we live in this part of the country. And I talk about Sandlot baseball, which, most folks who are not baseball people really don't know what the Sandlots were and what the Sandlots were in New York. And he's really a product, like a lot of other kids. Phil Rizzuto was the same way, real product of the Sandlots. We talk about in the book, we were able to go back and find all the teams he played for, and he played for all sorts of Sandlot teams. He himself described in an interview that his exact words were that he played for any team that would give him a bat. He played. He just loved the game and loved to play. Played in the neighborhoods of Brooklyn. Played in the Sandlots of Brooklyn. And one of the great things about having access to the family records is I have some of those photos. Some are in the book. I have a website that we put together. It's called American Baseball Stories. And I'm slowly putting more and more of the collection of photographs and articles up there just for people to be able to do some research to read more on the subject. So let's, okay, this is the photo that, this came from the family photo album. And here's what I know about the photo, but here's what I don't know about the photo. I know it's spring training. I know that for a variety of reasons, not least of which there's like 50 guys on the team. So there's not 50 guys on the team most of the year. We can see that there's palm trees in the background.
Steve, can I interrupt for 1 second?
Sure, go ahead.
Do you see where it says 42% up on top?
Talking about the size of the picture?
Yes, maybe if you made it bigger.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I was going to do, I wanted to make it bigger.
There you go.
Wanted to describe the picture first, and then I was going to make it.
My apologies.
Yeah, but I should have done it. So here we go.
Nick Bartell.
I wanted you to be able to see what was in the background. So the question we have, and I don't know the answer to this question, is this is spring training, but and I know there's palm trees in the background, and I know I can see certain players that are there and not there, but nobody in the family knows what year it is. And we could probably figure out what year it is if I had a better audience to look at the photo and tell me who some of the folks are. So I'm opening it up to the floor to tell me who you see and what year do you think this photo is.
Here, baby, you want no more?
Coach Bob Mayer, did you have a comment?
That's Nick Bartell, front right, without a hat.
This guy right here?
Dick Bartell, double A.
Oh, okay.
You hungry?
Who's the guy in the middle right here?
I don't know.
Looks like Rudy York.
Yeah, I thought it might be an odd picture of Johnny Mize, but I wasn't sure who it was.
Well,
Looks like a
based
catcher.
on the uniform and the script on New York,
Right.
where they had the stripes down the middle, it's definitely in the 40s.
Right.
But if it was in color and if it was blue over scarlet, it's before 1947.
Well, we don't have color, unfortunately. What I do know is here's Sid, and just looking at him and knowing it, pictures of him and talking to his son, Rich, it's certainly after the war. It's not, he was much thinner before the war.
Steve, the guy in the center front without a hat
right?
is carrying a catcher's mitt.
Yeah, it might be. Is it Ernie Lombardi?
No, it could be Harry Danning.
Oh, yeah, it could be Harry Danning. It looks, when people run and they're squinting because of the sun, you don't really get a great look of them. But Harry Danning wasn't on the team in 48 or 49, was he? Was he on the team after World War II?
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
I would say it's between 45 or 46.
Yeah, see, my guess, and Mitch Gordon thought the same. He and I thought it was 48 or 49, but I don't know how I say that. I can't really identify most of the players. One thing that stands out is if you look at the players, they all are wearing something underneath their jerseys as if it's cool or cold. And this guy in the front's got the plastic sleeves, like he's trying to lose weight or something. But Sid has I'm using the pointer. He's got a sweatshirt on. All these guys are wearing sweatshirts. Now, I'm fairly certain it's a spring training photo. I guess it can be cold in the morning, and it is the morning. If you look at the picture, you look at the shadows. It's either morning or night. And look at this. We're being the detectives here. That maybe the socks give it away. I don't know. Those are older socks.
They have a zipper.
Danning only stopped playing in 42 for the Giants. So
yeah, I
it was
doubt it's
Danning
that
in
early. It
42
could
or-
be.
you know.
It could be.
They had a jersey with a zipper in the 40s. I could probably look it up in the Dress to the Nines, what year it was, because they had a zipper in the middle instead of buttons.
Well, is that a zipper, you think? I can't tell.
Oh, yeah.
I think it could be a zipper.
I agree.
And-
I think it is.
Yeah, look at
They're
that.
all zippers. Yep.
Yeah, and
I think you're right.
the
That's a
colors
zipper.
were,
Look at that.
and I think the colors were blue over scarlet before they went back to black and orange in 1947. And the modernized jersey in the late 40s, they did away with the stripes.
I'll only say this, that makes a lot of sense. They may have been cheap and pulled out old uniforms for spring training, threw the guys in uniforms that were 2 years old. I don't know. The best way to figure it out, I guess, would be to figure out if you could figure out who some of the players were definitively, and then look and see when they were on the team. It doesn't look. I mean, Gordon was not. He was not in spring training with the Giants in 41. I think he was invited to spring training in 42, but sent back to Jersey City to start the season. So it could be 42, and it could be, it can't be 40. Let's put it this way: 40 and 43.
Boisel played from
They were
40
in New
to
Jersey.
47.
They were in New Jersey in 43, and I'm trying to remember now if they were in Florida in 42. But look, I mean, there's clearly palm trees in the background.
I wonder if there's any significance to some of the players having New York and some of them having Giants.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's a hodgepodge of uniforms, as if you remember if you played sports in those days, you went into the locker room and they dug a box out of a closet and handed you a bunch of crap, and the better players got the nicer stuff. The better players got the nicer stuff, and everybody else got whatever was left over. At least when I was in high school, we had a grouchy old trainer who he gave you the quality of the uniform he felt was appropriate. So I don't know. Anyhow, it's an interesting photo. I have a couple others like this. I don't have them all today, of folks who we can't clearly identify. I've got some guys who played in Jersey City with them who probably would only be remembered by their families at this point in time. So it seems as if the consensus is this is before the war.
No,
I thought this was a uniform that dates back to the early 40s with the zipper.
The way to find out is if you could name some of the players,
Right.
because they had that type of uniform in 1942, but they also had it after the war ended. And the key is Dress to the Nines, where they had a zipper in the middle and they had blue over scarlet. And because in 1947, they went back to black and orange.
What's the next picture?
The next picture is not as much of a mystery. Let me see what it is. I'm trying to remember. Oh, okay.
Good.
The next
Good.
picture, so, you know, I'm skipping around in the story, but the next picture is, Sid was in the Coast Guard. Sid was in the Coast Guard in World War II. He was stationed in Maryland at Curtis Bay. Played a lot of service ball. There's a whole chapter on baseball during the war and what different players did. And I was in the Marine Corps for 8 years. I was in the, you know, and I came from my dad's side of the family is career Navy. And so I not a historian, but I've read 5,000 books on World War II. And the way the government decided to use athletes and train the members of the military through playing sports is a fascinating story, and I try and tell it in the book. So Sid played on the Curtis Bay team, which was a pretty good team. They did some interesting stuff, played some interesting games. He actually pitched. They being a good athlete with a good arm, but not a pitcher. He actually pitched some games and pitched fairly well, surprisingly. This is just last comment. He also did a good deal of sea time. He did a good deal of time on patrol boats in the Chesapeake and in the Atlantic. And as most of you know, who have studied American history, there was a good deal of armed conflict off the east coast of the United States. And so he did do some actual sea time along with playing baseball. He went into the Coast Guard at the conclusion of the 43 season. He went in October of 1943. He got out in 46. This is him home on leave in 1944 with Michael Gordon. Mike passed away on what would have been Sid's 104th birthday in August 13th, 2021. But Mike was a tremendous help in putting this book together. He had an incredible memory and incredible stories. He knew the great players of the day. Willie Mays once gave him a jersey in the locker room. He spent a lot of time around the players. And Mike played in the minors for a while. He played in the Cardinals organization and had some great stories. I try and tell both Mike and Richard's minor league stories in the book. But Mike had a season where he came close but didn't quite make it to the big leagues. He was a catcher. But that's Sid, 1944 back in Brooklyn. I threw that in there because a lot of the story talks about Sid talks a lot about baseball, but I also talk about a lot about who he was, and what he did off the field and his contributions, what he did with his celebrity status. And I threw the picture in of him and Mike because frankly, it's one of my favorite pictures. Okay, so this is an interesting document. This is a letter. Now, Sid got out of the Coast Guard on, I think, if my memory's correct, January 12th, 1946. I have his discharge papers. He gets a letter from Horace Stoneham.
1396 St. John's Place. I lived at 1529
Well, you were neighbors.
St. John's Place.
I wonder whether or not, and maybe Rich could help me. That might have been Mary Gordon's address because
That's
during
correct.
during the war,
Oh.
Mary moved back in with her folks, right, Rich?
Yes, that's correct. Then you lived also near that pool hall.
That's Richard Gordon speaking, whoever that. So yeah, that's Mary. Sid was married to his wife Mary, and Michael was born before the war. But Mary lived on St. John's Place with her family. Mary's family had a little garment business. Their specialty was making women's corsets, and she worked in the shop on and off for years and worked there during the war. So that's where that is. But he gets a letter. I found this to be an entertaining letter from Horace Stoneham. What I found funny is we're sending you your contract, which I'll show you in a minute. Don't tell anybody, there's in those days they could keep those things somewhat of a secret. And he also says, we don't have any hotel rooms for your wife. So have a great season. The book has got a chapter on just spring training and talks about spring training and some of the interesting spring training trips over the years. And in the later years, Sid used to travel with his family on to spring training. So here's his contract.
Hey, Steve,
Yes, sir.
before you go away from that letter.
Right.
For some reason, baseball, if I'm seeing that correctly, he makes baseball 2 words. Or am I seeing that incorrectly? Look on the first line. The New York Baseball Club?
Yeah, well, you got to remember, there's no word processors. You type a letter in a typewriter, and
No
if
spell check.
the secretary, and if the secretary screws it up, you got to tear it up and do another one. So they, somebody looked at it and either didn't know how to spell baseball or said, what the heck.
Sorry to interrupt, but that struck me as funny too.
Yeah,
Horace got a D in spelling.
I don't know if Horace read it or not, but Horace Stoneham, and we tell this in the book as well, really loved Sid Gordon. Sid was one of those guys who was a good guy to have in the locker room. Later on in his career, Branch Rickey signs him with the Pirates in 1954. He plays the 54 season with the Pirates. And one of the reasons Branch Rickey wanted Gordon, he always liked him, always admired him. One of the reasons he wanted him was Branch Rickey wanted to integrate Pittsburgh. And he struggled to be able to do that. And it took him longer than he wanted. And he wanted somebody with some experience. And he wanted somebody, he wanted a locker room presence. And so he signed Sid. And Sid he started off the year hurt in 54. Missed a couple games, which pissed Branch Rickey off because he was the most highly paid guy on the Pirates. He had just canned Ralph Kiner because he, as most people know, he famously told Ralph Kiner, I'm paying you $100,000 a year. We're in last place. I don't need you. But he ended up having a pretty good year. He hit 306. He didn't hit a lot of home runs, but he hit 306 in Pittsburgh. And what I found fascinating and didn't know is that he played most of that year in left field as opposed to third base. Actually, I take that back. He played 54. He played most of his games in right field, about half of his games in right field. In 55, he started with the Pirates, and they moved him to left field because the Pirates had a rookie who would turn out to be one of the greatest right fielders of all time, and that's Roberto Clemente in right field. So Sid gets traded in May, the end of May, back to the Giants. The Giants put him in left field the first day back, and he looks to his left, and probably the greatest player who's ever played the game is Willie Mays is playing in center field. So I didn't know I really didn't realize, I guess, some of those things as a kid that he played with really the greats of the game. Anyhow, so there's this contract. Some of you guys may have seen this before, but as you probably know, there was no players union. There were uniform contracts. Every player, from the best player to the worst player, signed a National League, or I guess the American League may have had a slightly different version, form contract. And as you can see, his at $8,000 to play in 1946, which I didn't analyze that. I did for some of his later salaries to see what that's worth in today's money. I'm not really sure what it's worth, but I'm going to guess that $8,000 may have been worth about $45,000, maybe a little bit more than that, which isn't bad in those days, but it's obviously not the kind of money we're talking about players getting today. So, it's a uniform contract. The one thing that is interesting, I'm not sure what page it's on. It might be in the last page, which are the rules. Some of them we have with both signatures. This one, Horace Stoneham signed. Rich has the original contracts that are fascinating because he has the original Sid Gordon and Horace Stoneham signatures on his contracts. They're interesting documents. And these are the standard rules. And a lot of this covers the postseason barnstorming issues, which we talk about in the book, is a whole topic unto itself. I find fascinating. And we talk in the book about how these rules came about, and what it was like before and after. And really, Babe Ruth was prominent in this dispute. It ended up with this 30-day rule that is described here in this contract. What do we have next? That's the photo we talked about earlier. When I wanted to use it for the book, I had to have it. I actually had it restored because it was torn. The original one I have is torn, and I had a guy who was able to put Sid's hat back together. So here's the next question. Who can name everybody? This is 1948. That I can tell you. It's May of 48.
Willard Marshall,
That's Willard Marshall, 27.
27.
Whitey
Lockman,
Lockman, 25.
25. Yes,
That's
Whitey
correct.
Lockman.
Correct. Who are these two gentlemen? This guy looks African American, but he's not. When I first saw it, I thought, could that be Monty Irvin? But it's not, because
Matt Reyes, Napoleon Reyes.
You know, I don't remember. I did know at one point. I'm like the professor in law school who asked the question he doesn't know the dang answer to. I don't remember.
You could go to the 1946 roster.
Yeah, that's all you'd have to do is see the numbers. That's how I figured it out at the time. But I recognized Willard Marshall right away because Marshall and Gordon were real close. They were lifelong friends. Anyhow, I have one more photo quiz we'll get to. So this is the fall of 48. I think this is October 1948. That's Sid, obviously, on the left, Jackie Robinson. I can't recall the other two gentlemen, but they were named by some organization the New York City Athletes of the Year. I have I don't know, dozens of photos of Gordon and Robinson. And one of the things that I never really completely grasped was that these guys were real friends. Their families were friends. Their wives were friends. They, during the late 40s and the early 50s, they went on vacation together at a time where, Black folks and white folks didn't go on vacation together, but they did. They were often featured together as speakers at different events where they spoke. The typical topic they spoke about was brotherhood through sports, and that was they spoke at various different organizations. And some of them, I don't remember if I put them in this presentation, but I have a number of photos of the two of them together at speaking engagements. And I've been able to find a couple of articles that actually have text of some of the comments made. So I don't know why I threw that one in, other than I find it a silly drawing of Sid. I don't think he looks like that. Do you, Rich?
A little bit.
A little bit. But he during a stretch of time that most of you know, I'm assuming, from 48 to 52, those 5 seasons, he was really one of the best players. This is from 1949, this magazine cover. He was really one of the best and most popular players. He had 5 strong, consistent seasons. We get into and we have discussions about the greatest players and Hall of Fame players. Unfortunately, you can't make the Hall of Fame on having 5 good seasons. It's just, you really need to be better than that and be better than that for longer. But anyway, I threw that in just because it was just kind of an example of some of the stuff we have, photos and magazine articles. I guess I could have thrown 100 different things in, but I picked that one because I don't know, I find the picture entertaining. This one, I tripped over this and then I learned the story about it. Has anybody ever seen this before, this Saturday Evening Post cover?
Yep. Good cover.
Yeah,
So
we talked about that. Who was talking about it before that? Rockwell tried to get a black person into that scene, but was rebuffed.
right. So here's the story. It's a great story, and I knew nothing about it until I researched it. That's obviously Sid Gordon. The title of and this is April. I think if it's March, it's April of 1950. Well, the first problem is Sid ain't on the Giants in April of 1950. He's on the Braves. And the title of the painting, it's not painted by Norman Rockwell. It's painted by this gentleman right here, whose name is Austin Briggs, who's also a painter, cartoonist. And this is a little blurry the way I got it in here, but the title of this painting that he did for the Saturday Evening Post was Catching the Home Run Ball. And I believe that Catching the Home Run Ball was actually on the cover of the magazine somewhere or described inside. You know, Sid is obviously, A, he's not on the Giants. B, he's not catching a home run ball. He's clearly catching a foul ball behind the third base bag. But the story that somebody was alluding to is, so this is and the story is that this gentleman loved baseball, went to lots of games, and he had his camera with him. As you can see, he's got his camera. And then he took lots of photos, and from these photos would create these different paintings he made. He's got his kids with him, these two red-haired guys, his son and daughter. The son tells this story in an article I read, a detailed story. So this woman here is Fanny Drain is her name. So the story goes that Briggs brings the painting to the Saturday Evening Post office, and they tell him, great painting, but there's a bunch of problems with it. First of all, Sid Gordon is not on the Giants. You're going to have to fix his face. Second, they say, you can't paint yourself in the stands sitting with an African-American woman. We can't sell that in parts of the country. Well, Briggs got pissed off and refused to make any changes and stormed out. The Post owned the painting because they had commissioned him to do it. So they had an artist attempt to fix Gordon's face. I don't know. That's obviously Sid Gordon to anybody's ever seen him play. And they artist painted this, you know, this was a woman that was clearly African-American. They touched her head up so that you couldn't tell who she was, and it ended up running in April of 1950. There is a framed copy of that. Sid and Mary had a framed copy of it hanging in their house.
Sid is wearing visiting gray.
It looks like he is wearing gray. It's hard to tell, but that certainly looks gray, doesn't it?
It's not white.
No, it's not. So, it's probably, if you analyze the covers of numerous magazines or numerous paintings, Rockwell did many of the Saturday Evening Post, but not all of them. Rockwell became difficult to deal with and expensive. So the Post started using other artists to paint in the same style as Rockwell. Briggs was one of those. I'm sure if we analyzed, lots of them would have all kinds of errors. This one, I just tripped over it and by chance read the story. And a lot of the story in the book, especially we get into the 1950s, talks about some of Sid's experiences, you know, with discrimination as he traveled around the country, as he played on a barnstorming tour in 1951, as he traveled through the South at the end of spring training, and some of his experiences. One of the more fascinating stories, and it was told to me by Rich, who's here, and his brother Mike, is that they were traveling down to Florida in it was either 53 or 54. I think it was 53 from the way they told the story. And the Gordons had a woman that worked for them who helped watch the kids and was a housekeeper, and she just became part of the family and was traveling with them to spring training. And the kids were there and they were all in the car together. Well, the woman was African-American. They stopped in a diner in the Carolinas and were refused service. And, you know, I won't forget when the Mike and Rich told me the story, it was as if they were experiencing it over again, that, you know, their dad was a calm, even-tempered, reasonable person, and he just, you know, blew his top. And, you know, the guy in this crappy little, you know, Carolina diner had no idea who the hell he was. He was just some white guy and a black woman, and he wasn't about to let him eat in his diner. And Sid really gave it to him. And, you know, we tell that story in the book, along with some of the other spring training, you know, stories that he experienced along the way, even as late as 1955, when he was in spring training with the Pirates, and the Pirates are playing an exhibition game in Birmingham, and by local ordinance, Roberto Clemente couldn't play. You know, one of the greatest players of all time. So anyhow, moving on. So I don't know if anybody's ever seen this, but this is a in 1949, Major League Baseball had kind of embarrassed at the way now there's several African Americans in the league. There's a couple, 5, 6, 8 are being treated. And of course, Gordon is Jewish. And many people forget that DiMaggio, you know, early in his career as an Italian, took a lot of abuse. So Major League Baseball did a variety of things to try and promote, you know, a campaign against discrimination in the sport. And this is one of them. You can see, obviously, it's a poster. You got Mel Allen, you got Bob Feller, Robinson, Gordon, and DiMaggio. Actually, there is a similar poster and other things, but this actual thing was a blotter, like a desk blotter, you know, which was something of fashionable in the times.
Mel's last name was Israel. Mel Israel.
Right. Well, I didn't know his last name, but I knew he was Jewish. Okay, so here's another one of these photos. This is from 49. You've obviously got Sid Gordon and you got Gil Hodges, and you have got Giants players on the left and Dodger players on the right, teamed up in a fundraiser against cancer, which is surprising even back in the 40s that, you know, these events took place, at least to somebody my age. So this is again another one of who can name everybody in the photo picture.
Willard Marshall, lower left.
Yep.
Monty Irvin on the left.
Yep. Yeah.
Bobby Thompson.
One of them is Bobby. My screen's covered. Well, this is Hank Thompson. And this is Monty Irvin, and this is Willard Marshall, Gil Hodges. I got a box in front of mine. The guy right here.
Isn't this Joe Pignatano on the far right?
You know what? I couldn't figure out who that was. That's a good guess. I believe the guy on it right here where my pointer is, I think that's Ralph Branca. Anybody?
I don't think so.
I thought it was Bobby.
Oh, you think that's Bobby Thompson? Could be.
No, it's not Bobby.
No, it's not Bobby Thompson.
No, it's not
No.
Bobby.
Not Branca.
I think it's Ralph Branca.
No.
No.
No?
Can't be.
Looks like he has a bowling shirt on.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they were in a bowling alley or where they were. I mean, later on, I know this is from 49, but later on, both Hodges and Gordon owned bowling alleys. Actually, they had some of the same financial guys. They both owned bowling alleys in Brooklyn. Gil Hodges Lanes is still there.
I went every Friday night.
Yeah, I have a T-shirt. A buddy of mine from Brooklyn sent me he sent me a T-shirt. It says, "I bowled at Gil Hodges Lanes." Sid Gordon was Sid Gordon Strikes and Spares, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's opened in 61.
That's right.
So it opened in 61, and I think it was it 62? They got robbed at gunpoint on opening day of Major League Baseball, and Sid stole the headlines. There's a long, crazy story behind it if you haven't heard it. So they couple guys came, they literally took the safe. You know, they had, you know, picture of a safe that's probably 5 feet tall. These guys dragged the dang safe out, and they brought it back to one of these guys' homes, and they cracked open the safe, and then they got in an argument over splitting up the money. So one of the guys shot one of the other guys, and the guy who got shot was taken to the hospital and thought he was going to die. So he told on the rest of the gang members, and they ended up catching them all. More relevant to Sid is that Sid had gotten a camera, right, Rich? He got a camera that was a gift from the New York Yankees at some old timers game. And it was a prized possession, and the son of a gun stole Sid's camera, which he never got back. And as Rich tells me, Rich or Mike told me, is after this happened, Sid used to work at the alley. He was there all the time. Mary told him he couldn't work there anymore, right, Rich?
He was banned.
Yeah, so she thought it was too dangerous.
He was
So yeah,
banned.
I'm not sure who all these folks are. You know, this is another one.
That's, the guy beneath Hodges is Bobby Aspromonte,
Oh, boy.
Ah.
who was the final of the trivia there. That guy was the last of the Brooklyn Dodgers to play in the major leagues.
Wow.
If Greg Prince is on, and he was, I'm pretty sure that's Joe Pignatano on the far right.
It
I
is.
think you're right.
Gary, that's Pignatano on the upper right.
Yeah.
I knew I would get help from this crowd. So there's a lot of photos we have, you know, they're just, you know, taped into these albums, and, you know, they're yellow, they're faded, they're falling apart. You know, when you open up the box that these albums are in, like, you know, moths fly out. I mean, they're some of the stuff that is 80 years old, some of the articles and photos, and, you know, trying to figure out who they are and where they fit into the story, you know, was really fascinating. If we were all in a room together and we brought some of this stuff out and you looked at it, some of the stuff's just fascinating. We have scorecards, you know, handwritten scorecards from minor league games in the late 30s. You know, and Rich and I were looking at them at one point, and one thing Rich said is, look, every one of these things, you know, my dad went 2 for 4, 3 for 2, you know, he's consistently getting on base every game. I do hear the dog barking in the background. So this is another great photo. This one's owned by Getty Images, so I got to give Getty Images a plug for it. But I did purchase the rights to use it for the book. That's obviously Robinson, Gordon, and DiMaggio. And I had originally thought this was from the 1949 All-Star game, but it's actually the day before the 49 All-Star game. They did what they called a tri-corner game. It was a charity game between the Dodgers, the Giants, and the Yankees. And each team played 3 innings. So, for example, the Dodgers played the Giants for 3 innings, and then the Giants would play the Yankees for 3 innings, and then the Dodgers played the Yankees for 3 innings. And at the end, whoever had the most runs won the game. And they also had a whole series of contests, including a home run derby. You know, Gordon was in the home run derby. I don't have my memory fades me now, but I think there were like 12 guys in the home run derby, and like 10 of them were future Hall of Famers. You know, of course, that's the era when the Yankees were in the World Series pretty much every year for 10 years. So I have a framed copy of this in my office. Of course, if anybody had a framed signed one by all of them, it would be worth a fortune. So that's where that one came from. This is another family photo album. There's a couple from this day. This is most of you probably recognize. This is Ebbets Field, and Sid's got his away uniform on. This is 1948. Gordon is having he's having his first huge season, but he's having an all-star season. And the Dodgers, their arch rivals, decide to honor the native son of Brooklyn with a Sid Gordon Day. We only found one instance. We tried to figure out if it had ever been done before, and the only time it was ever done before, that was like 100 years earlier. The Dodgers honored somebody, but he was a former player. He wasn't an active player. So I'm not sure that any active player in baseball, other than, like guys like Derek Jeter and, guys that are now on these farewell tours. This is during the middle of the season. They stopped. I should have there's another picture or a couple of pictures. I mean, they gave Sid, Rich is a car guy. Rich used to own a car dealership. What was it? Did they give him a Pontiac, Rich? Is that what it was?
Chrysler.
A Chrysler. So they gave him a car, a set of golf clubs, and a whole bunch of other stuff. One of the things that I was able to use to write the book is Sid's wife, Mary, lived to age 95 and was sharp as a tack until the very end. And, when she was in her 90s, Michael Gordon interviewed her and recorded a couple of hours of interviews with his mom, telling stories about what it was like, to live with Sid and all their adventures. And she tells this story and a bunch of others. And, one of the things she says that they gave him was a giant sack of potatoes. Now, I mean, can you imagine nowadays a player being honored, Derek Jeter, whoever it would be, and he gets a giant sack of potatoes from a grocery store in Brooklyn, which she claims they gave away. Another story that Mary told that's in the book, and she's, again, she's being interviewed by Mike, and she's kind of piggybacking off of this Ebbets Field story. And she says, one of the things that they gave Sid to honor him was a bear. And like Mike Gordon says, Mom, they didn't really give Dad a bear. And she goes, no, he got a bear. They gave him a bear and we gave it to the zoo. So, Mike, in the interview, you could hear the tone of his voice. He thinks this is just, the kind of ramblings of an old person who's confused. So little did I know that when I started doing some research, sure as heck, Sid actually won a bear. He's playing for the Braves, and the owner of the Braves, Perini, is trying to find ways to attract fans, to make it exciting. And he had all kinds of crazy events to draw fans, because the Braves, and one of the reasons, of course, they left Boston was the Red Sox were getting all the fans. So they had what they called a State of Maine Day, and they had all kinds of different contests and games, and they gave free tickets or whatever it was, to discounted tickets to folks that came down from Maine. And they had a contest. The first player to hit a home run in this game would get a baby bear cub. Well, wouldn't you know, Sid hit a home run, and the name of the bear was called Homer. So Sid won the bear. And there's a humorous story report. I mean, Perini's objective in this was to get a lot of publicity, to show people it's fun to come out to games. There are about 5 or 6 Boston Globe stories on it. If you just Google or look, for any on Homer the Bear, the Boston Braves, and you'll find these different stories about how Sid hit a home run and won the bear, and what they were going to do with the bear. And eventually the bear ended up a guest of the local zoo. So I should have bought the one with the car and the golf clubs. That one is rather entertaining as well. So, okay, here we go. I had to put this one in. This is not Sid Gordon. This is Richard, who's with us tonight. Rich played in the minors in the Giants system. There he is in, what is this, 1970, Rich?
That's a long time ago. Yep, that's about 52 years ago.
That's
Right.
1969 because of the commemoration of the National League anniversary of 100 years. See the patch on the left sleeve.
The
That's the
uniform,
1969 jersey.
the uniform was a hand-me-down.
Oh, okay.
So Rich,
It was a year old before I got into it.
What
Rich?
ballpark is that at?
That's in Great Falls, Montana.
Okay.
Rich played third base like his dad. And I'm not going to get into all the stories. Rich, we tell some of Rich's minor league stories in the book, but Rich led the Montana Falls Giants in batting, right, Rich? I think this 1970 season.
That was a brief career, but I got lucky. I think I ran more like my father than hit like him. But Dad was always the best supporter going.
So I should have, and I didn't, I should have dragged in, I have another picture of Michael Gordon, who I think Gary told me Mike used to be part of this group at some, or
Was.
yeah, who Mike played for the Cardinals, and I have a picture of Mike in his St. Louis Cardinals uniform. Mike was at spring training with the big league Cardinals in 1965. The team had just won the World Series. Mike was a catcher. The starting catcher was Tim McCarver. The backup catcher was Bob Uecker. And as good as Mike was, he was a pretty good player. Mike could not beat out Bob Uecker for the backup catcher's position, and remained in the minors, played in the minors for a while until he finally decided it was time to grow up and get a real job, as Rich did. Rich decided to grow up and get a real job, and he ended up working for Ford Motor Company and living happily ever after. But there he is. Look at that. He's got the Gordon swing. So this is another family photo. You can only probably name one or two people in this photo, but this is Michael Gordon's. And again, the book talks, there's a lot of baseball. We talk a lot of baseball, balls and strikes and batting averages and games, but a lot of the story is a personal story, and the story I tried to talk about as best I could, from what records I had and what I could find out about the relationship between Sid and Jackie Robinson. They did a lot of things together. They go out for dinner together. They both like to go to the track. They would go to the track. This is goodness, I'm trying to think of the year. This is probably 1956. So they're both
His
out
bar
of base.
mitzvah. It's
Yeah,
his bar mitzvah.
that's Michael Gordon's bar mitzvah in 1956.
That's Rachel Robinson.
That's Rachel Robinson. And hold on, Rich. This is your mom right here, right next to Jackie.
No, that's my mom's not in the picture. That's my dad's sister,
Okay.
Florence, and to
And
the
Evelyn.
right, his other sister, Evelyn.
Yeah, who I knew. And
Dad-
this is
And that's Dad's mom.
this is
That's Rose.
this is Rose, who was my aunt. And so my grandmother looked a little bit like her, but was not as tough as Rose. Rose was the toughest old lady you ever want to know. If she stood on that chair, she might not have been as tall as Jackie Robinson, but you don't get in her way. But so I try and tell that story. There's I think I have I think I have a couple others in this presentation. There's couple dozen pictures of these guys together. And Rachel's still alive. She's 100 years old. I tried to reach out to her and her daughter, and frankly, I'm just a guy writing a book who nobody knows and nobody's heard of, and they didn't get back to me, which is okay. I wouldn't necessarily expect them to. Frankly, I don't know what people know or remember, from all those years ago. So, yeah, that's what that picture is. The other side of it is my mom and dad were at that, and my dad is 80. He is 87, right? He's 87 years old, and it's one of the biggest thrills of his life that he got to talk to Jackie Robinson at this bar mitzvah. Here's another. This is Sid Gordon. This is Jackie Robinson. Most people know who this is. Am I correct?
Buddy Hackett.
Yeah, Buddy Hackett. This is from Grossinger's up in the Catskills, which was a place lots of these players went to.
Great golf course.
This is, I think this is 1953. This one is dated. I don't have it's cut off, but I think this is from 1953. Which is interesting. You can see Robinson's already getting gray. He's still in the league for another year or two. This is, let me make this one bigger. This is another one from Getty Images. And
Andy Pofko in the background.
Right here?
That's Pofko.
I thought that was Willard Marshall.
Oh,
Looks
that's
like
not Willard.
I think that's Willard Marshall.
Nope.
Is it? Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's Willard Marshall. I'm far from an expert on it. I'm the first to confess. This is Sam Jethro on the right, and obviously Robinson and Gordon. Jethro, Marshall is in 1,000 pictures of Gordon all over the place. These guys, as Rich can say, they were friends. Their wives were friends. They stayed friends, until Sid passed away. And when he was traded, when Gordon was traded, Marshall was traded with him. So I'm pretty sure that's who that is. And this is, gosh, I'm trying to remember if it's 51 or 52. I think it's 52 in spring training. Hang on, let me move along here. So we only have one or two more. Or do we not? Maybe the last one. What number was that? Oh, it may be the last one. I thought I had one more picture. I don't. That is the last picture. So I can, I could end the screen sharing. I could close it out. I can probably, at this point, I'm probably best better, making a couple quick remarks and then answering any questions and letting Gary, you drive the train there. So
just go, turn it back over to me, make your comments, then I'll make some comments, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Okay.
That works for you.
So, I just pulled together some stuff I thought was interesting. I could have probably put together some other stuff. It's a baseball book, but it's a book really about, and the reason I had the title An American Baseball Story is because it's really a book about American society and how baseball influenced American society in this critical period, and how American society and what was going on in the country and in the world influenced baseball, and what was Gordon's role in that. And his role in that was something important. I mean, he was not Joe DiMaggio, he was not Mickey Mantle, but he was a pretty solid player. But more importantly, he was a really solid person. And I try and tell that story. I don't know that I don't have time now, so I'll leave it for another day. But the last chapter of the book, I do a somewhat amusing but accurate assessment of different statistics. And if you look at Gordon's statistics, his batting average, his home run production, but more importantly, on-base percentage and some of the more complex statistics, he's up there with some of the great players of the game. Not a Hall of Fame player, but, and candidly, didn't play long enough, didn't win a World Series, but an interesting player. But more relevantly, what I really try and tell in the book is who he was as a person, what he meant to the people around him, and what role he played in shaping the game and in shaping the country during that period of time. So, I'm not a professional writer. I'm not a professional historian. But I'm a baseball guy like the rest of you folks. And I hope I put together something that you read and enjoy. And I hope I put something together that when you read it, you'll have questions and you'll want to look at something. Is that really true? Or maybe there's another piece to that. And I hope that somebody out there who reads the book, will write and say, this is wrong. It should be done. It means something else. Or somebody can take a piece of what I found about the history of those times and say, that's interesting. Somebody should do more with that and do something else. Because that's really, why we read history. It's really why we read about baseball during that era. We read it and study it and are fascinated by it because it still affects, us as a society today. So that's what I tried to do. Hopefully I did some great stories justice. I really appreciate, Gary's invitation here. I appreciate, Gary as a new friend. I've talked to him a bunch of times. I think he's got a dog too. My dog's barking away now. Gary's one of dozens of new people, new friends I met around the country who I didn't know, and we have a shared interest. So I appreciate it. I hope to come back to some other meetings and sit quietly and listen to folks and to some of the other presentations. Gary, you're in charge of the ship at this point.
Steve, just an incredible presentation. Let's give it up for Steve Cahn.
Great photos.
Wonderful.
Couple of things. Just want to thank Richard Gordon for coming on. And, you know, Steve said he wasn't a Hall of Fame player, but after reading that book, he sounded like a Hall of Fame dad to you, which I'm sure he was. And Steve, the best way to get the book is again through Amazon.
Well, I'll tell you that Amazon has got it in pre-order. You can go on Amazon and get it. It'll show up in a couple weeks. We have a website that's interesting. It's called, you can go sidgordonbaseball.com. It's called AmericanBaseballStories.com. If you say, I need the book tomorrow, you can buy it directly from the publisher. It's a couple dollars more, but you can get it immediately. You can get it from Barnes and Noble. Barnes and Noble and Amazon are still in a pre-order phase, so it's a few weeks before you'll get it. The website shows you the different ways to get it. If you're interested, you know, the website has got more photos and stories and some news articles. It's got some video of Sid playing baseball with the Giants. It's got some interviews, audio interviews with Russ Hodges. For baseball fans, I hope to put a lot of stuff up there. I hope to collect things from other people. Gary, you may have things. And I'd like to create a site where people can go to learn more and be entertained beyond the Sid Gordon book itself. So,
you know, my feelings were, you know, most biographers, you know, speak to the guy, but you being a relative, I think in this case really helped out. You were able to speak to a lot of people who, you know, like his sons and the like. So I think that was good. The whole racial and religious discrimination is covered great and very, very interesting. And, you know, there are quite a few retired attorneys on board here tonight. So I know they especially enjoyed your presentation.
I hope to be one of them someday.
And my one baseball question is, I know near the end of his career, the Dodgers were thinking about signing him. Did he grow up, you know, since he lived in Brooklyn, was his dream to play for the Dodgers, or
he was a Yankee fan? And he says, somebody asked him that question in an interview, I think Dick Young, and he said, you know, I just wanted to play ball. I didn't care where I played, but I never really, you know, dreamed of playing in Ebbets Field. One quick note, which I found interesting, he almost ended up back on the Giants in 51. He was with the Braves, and the Braves were negotiating with the Giants. The Giants wanted Johnny Sane, and there was negotiations that involved Gordon and some other players. And Gordon and Sane would have gone to the Giants. Bobby Thompson and a couple other players would have gone to the Braves, and Gordon could have ended up in that pennant run in 51. And he almost ended up on the Dodgers in 55, where the Dodgers went to the World Series. Branch Rickey was negotiating with the Dodgers, and the Giants outbid him. And Gordon went back to the Giants in 55, and the Giants didn't have a great year. So he kind of missed out. He almost made the World Series a couple times in a couple ways.
All right, let's open it up. We're going to go Mars, Norm, Dan, and then the judge. Mars?
Yeah, well, thank you, Steve. That was a wonderful timepiece. I found it very informative. When you look at that old pictures, I have a couple of comments and then I'd like to address. My maternal grandparents lived across the street from Crotona Park, and there used to be sandlot games where there were mostly Latin ball players that were starting to come to New York from the Caribbean islands, Puerto Rico, Cuba. And I remember not only watching those games as a child, but there was a lake, probably a man-made lake in Crotona Park. And I saw all these Black people throwing crumbs in the lake around the high holy Jewish holidays. And I asked my maternal grandmother, what are they doing? And she said, they're casting their sins away. I believe it was Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, where you throw crumbs in a lake, you know. And so they were Ethiopian Black Jews. And then when you talk about the sandlot games, well, they still exist, mostly Latin players. I went to Washington High School in Manhattan, and they still have those sandlot games where Latin players that might have had one break where they were on the big league club for a short period of time, or they were in AAA, but they didn't quite make it. And there are all these Latin leagues that are playing sandlot baseball in places like the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Manhattan.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful timepiece to go back then, because, you know, although even in New York, where racial equality wasn't quite what it was meant to be, considering all the blacks that came from the South up to New York that thought they would have a better deal. Well, it wasn't so, because Sarah Vaughan had to use the service entrance where she was headlining at the Lincoln Hotel. So it was a very interesting timepiece, and I really commend you for all the research you've done. Thank you very much.
Norm, you're up.
Okay, I want to thank you also. I absolutely loved your photos. Gary, if you would let me share my screen, I could maybe solve the question about where the spring training was.
Go ahead,
from the
Norm.
picture. Okay. This is Miami Field, 1946. There's all these palm trees in the background.
Yeah, that looks like it.
And then here's also Miami Field, 1946. And here's the same uniforms with the zippers. And the only years that Dick Bartell, Johnny Mize, and Sid Gordon were on the New York Giants were 42 and 46. And
Good detective work.
They also played in Miami Field in 1942, so it's probably Miami Field.
Good. That's excellent detective work. I agree with you.
So, but thank you so much. I really enjoyed your presentation.
That was the point I made before, is, you know, I love throwing things out there and letting people take it further and figuring it out. That's why I brought that photo, because we couldn't figure it out. Sid's two kids couldn't figure it out. We didn't know, and you solved it tonight, so that's great.
Okay, well, I'm glad to help, and then just because you did a great service for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Before I go to Dan, Jerry Grillo, did you happen to see Johnny Mize in that photo? Unmute yourself.
Oh, yeah. You know, I wasn't sure. The guy in the center that he looked kind of like Mize. And I was looking at pictures of Mize while we were looking at that. And I was looking at some of the other fellas that we mentioned. He looked most like Mize. You know, he kind of had that squinty-eyed look, and definitely a bigger smile than I'm used to seeing on Mize. But you know, that could have been him, you know, especially the years that that were mentioned. I think it was 42 and 46. Mize, you know, Mize was on both of those teams. By 43, I think he was in the Navy. I don't know if he played for the Giants in 43, but anyway.
Thank you, Jerry. The reason I called on Jerry is in the midst of writing a big time biography on Johnny Mize. Thank you, Jerry, and best of luck with your book. Dan Taylor, you're up.
Thanks, Gary. Steve, terrific. Thank you very much for this. It was really fascinating. I got a question for you and a question for Rich, if Rich is still here. Starting off with Rich, who was the scout that signed you for the Giants, and who was your manager at Great Falls?
Sal Margaglione signed me. He was in Queens, where I grew up, and Harvey Kepf.
Harvey Kepf.
AOEPF.
Yep.
Was the manager out in Great Falls.
Terrific. Thank you. Steve, for you, relating to that 1946 Horace Stoneham letter, the one that got him disqualified from the spelling bee. It talked about, you know, hotel in Miami. Was that the year of the great controversy where he was denied a hotel room in Miami and Bill Terry had to come to his defense? If I remember the story right.
I'm not sure I don't know the story. Who was? Gordon was, or somebody else?
Yeah, my understanding was that when he reported for spring training, he was refused a room at the team hotel because he was Jewish, and they wouldn't house people.
Yeah, I have not heard that story, and I can only tell you that Sid often got his own accommodations. I never heard that story. And Mary talks about spring training and some of these issues. She never described that story. And by then, Sid would have probably gone with his wife and son. So he stayed off campus generally. So I don't know. I never heard that.
I'll have to look that story up, and if I find it, I'll send it.
Yeah, please do.
Great. Thanks again.
Thank you, Dan. Judge, you're up.
Thanks, Gary. Stephen, I enjoyed that. The sports album magazine that you had a slide of caught my eye. What year was that?
I think it's 49.
49. Okay. It caught my eye because there were a list of names on the left under baseball, and one of them was Johnny Antonelli.
Right.
And Johnny graduated from high school in 1948. So I thought you said the magazine was from 48. So I was wondering what.
No, 49. Well, you can't read it there, but I have the actual magazine. I'm almost positive it's 49.
Yeah,
it can't be later than 49 because Sid Gordon was on the Braves in 50. So I'm almost positive it's 49.
Yeah, Johnny was a bonus baby and came out of high school and got a big contract. And it's interesting that a national magazine would have been writing about it at the time, but that caught my eye. Just wanted to double check the date.
That's a magazine that was really mostly photos and baseball cards. It's not really a lot of in-depth reporting. So
interesting. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Paul, you're up.
Hi, Steve. I was really interested thank you very much, by the way. There's so much information here. I was looking at the standard contract that he was offered. Is that in the book? Did you print a copy of that in the book?
I did not. It's on the website though.
It is on the website.
I think
okay.
If I remember right, the 46 and 49, both contracts are on the website, AmericanBaseballStories.com. Okay. I have his 51 or 52 contract. I can put more up there. I have a couple of them, but I have those two. Those two are up there.
I was just curious to see what the rules were for players. The standard contract rules, what everybody had to follow.
It's up there. Go look. You go look when you get off. Go look on the website. You'll see it there.
Okay. I will include that when we send out the recording. I'll make sure that the website is listed as well. So Steve will get a lot of hits on it.
Thank you. Okay.
Ed, you're up.
Again, I want to go back to that magazine too, because I was glancing through it, and that seemed like a pretty precocious list of players for that time. And one of the names I noticed was from football was Chuck Bednarik. And of course, everybody remembers here who playing against the Giants.
Yeah, he put Frank Gifford out for the season.
He put Frank Gifford down good. That's an interesting article in that magazine.
And Chuck Bednarik played offense and defense, 60 minutes.
And that would have been, that was 13
any comments or questions for Steve? Coach, you're up.
Okay, some years ago, I spent time with Mike Gordon, who told me that Sid was playing softball at Central Park. His sons were both there. He suffered a heart attack. He passed away right there. And Richard, the younger brother, said to Mike, "What are we going to tell Mom?"
Well,
true.
No, but it's partly true. Richard can answer that. Richard and Mike weren't there, but the rest of the story's true.
Well, first off, Mike and I were not there. Dad was playing, had a heart attack, and he took him to Lenox Hill Hospital. And Mike was actually living in California at the time. I was living in New Jersey. And I had gotten home from working that day, and the phone rang as I walked into the apartment, and it was my mom. And she said she had just gotten a call from the police that Dad had been taken to Lenox Hill Hospital. So I just made a U-turn, jumped in the car, drove from Fort Lee to Jamaica, Queens, and drove to Lenox Hill. And as we got there, we were told that about 10 minutes before we had gotten there, that Dad had passed away. That's the story.
Thanks, Richard. And Steve, tremendous evening.
The other part of the story is that Sid had an earlier heart attack, and
That's right.
Mary didn't want him playing softball, but he was playing. So some of his teammates and friends, not Mike and Richard, knew that and told Mary that he wasn't playing, he was just at the game watching. But the true story was actually reported by Roger Cahn, among others, is he was in left field running for a fly ball and had a heart attack. But so Mike told you something similar to that. Mike said they had to keep it from mom. Am I right, Rich? I mean,
That's
Mary
correct.
wasn't told the true story because she would have been furious at Sid for playing.
There were two stories for many years. One was that mom, she was pretty sharp though. She just went along with it maybe. But the two stories were, one, he wasn't playing, but the real side of it was he was playing. He probably went 5 for 5 that game.
How old was he when he passed away?
57.
Oh, dear.
That's 47 years ago, 1975.
The other related story is Richard, and I'll be very short on it because the dog is barking. Richard and Michael were playing in a fantasy camp's not really the correct description, but they were playing baseball as guys in their 40s down in Florida at spring training. And Mike was on second. Guy hits the ball to the outfield, and Mike decides, even though I'm even slower than Dad, I can score from second, and he does. He scores from second, but Mike had a heart attack. And as Rich is a great storyteller. Rich told me the story. The right fielder comes sprinting in, and by pure luck, the right fielder was a cardiologist, and they took Mike to the hospital, and he recovered, and he was fine eventually. So it was almost a second tragedy. Closely related.
That's a true story.
Thank you. Anybody else with a comment before we wrap this up? Go ahead, Jerry.
Yes, Steve, great. Really appreciate your the talk. Really cool stuff about Sid Gordon. Was Sid one of the nice guys that Leo Durocher was referring to?
That's the opening line in the book, and yes, it is. Leo Durocher. If you read the first few pages, I think it's on page 3 of Durocher's book, he says just that. And it was reported the next day in the New York Journal American. He's talking about Gordon. I think he's talking about Mize. I can't recall, but he's talking about Gordon and others. Yeah. And he says, look at those guys. He's talking about look at those guys. And he lists them, and Gordon is one. They're the nicest guys in the world, but they're going to finish last, and so on. So that's the opening line in the book. And at one point, I had the idea of using Durocher and Gordon in juxtaposition personality-wise, and you'll see some of that in the book. But at some point, I felt that I was, and you could probably appreciate this as a writer, I felt I was too tied to a theory that I didn't need to be tied to. But that you'll see that in the book, is lots of times I compare, like, what would Durocher do and what would Gordon do in the book. But yes, he was one of the nice guys. And I wanted to use, my original idea was nice guys finish first. And once I started doing research, I realized Monty Irvin had already used that name.
Well, listen, Steve, we cannot thank you enough. Fabulous presentation.
Thanks,
Richard,
Gary.
thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
And if, Richard, if you want to come to future meetings, just email me. I'll add you to our list. But Steve, do not be a stranger, and I'm going to give you one more time to plug the book. Go ahead. Where can they get it?
I'll be back. But if anybody after an hour and a half doesn't know the dang name of the book and in this day and age, everything you ever wanted in your life is on Amazon. So it's always there. I appreciate it, Gary. And I will be back. I'll be back to learn, because I'm like everybody else. I'm a student of the game, and you're never too old to learn more about the game and more about players. I learned things here tonight. I hope to have one more good book in me, and I may figure out what it is by hanging out with this group.
Let's all give it up for Steve Cahn.
Yay! Thank you, Steve, very much.
Guys,
Thanks, guys.
Have a great Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas. I will be in the room here if you want to talk some Giant baseball. But take good care. We will reconvene in 2 weeks. Steve, again, thank you so much.
Thanks. I'm gonna go
Good night,
take the dog
everybody.
out. The dog wants to go out, so.
Good night, everybody.
Hear that?